Thanks for tuning in to the Elevation Recovery Podcast, your hub for addiction recovery strategies, hosted by Chris Scott and Matt Finch.
Trauma is perhaps the most avoided, ignored, belittled, denied, misunderstood, and untreated cause of human suffering. Dr. Peter Levine, PhD. Here's the mind-only view. The dictionary says trauma is a deeply distressing or disturbing experience. According to the APA, trauma is an emotional response to a terrible event, like an accident, crime, or natural disaster. Right after the event, shock and denial are typical. Longer-term reactions include unpredictable emotions, flashbacks, strained relationships, and even physical symptoms like headache or nausea. While these feelings are normal, some people have difficulty moving on with their lives. Psychologists can help them find constructive ways of managing their emotions. And so that's it. It's just, it's normal, and some people have difficulty moving on. Well, maybe because psychologists alone helping them with talk therapy isn't going to do it. Here's the mind-brain-body view. According to the author of The Body Keeps the Score, really good popular book, traumatized people chronically feel unsafe inside their bodies. Woo! Let's just pause on that right there. I think we need to chill on that for a second. Traumatized people chronically feel unsafe in their bodies. That reminds me of all the times at AA meetings that I heard others say, and I myself said, I drank because I didn't feel comfortable in my own skin. That sure sounds like being unsafe in my own body, their own body. The past is alive in the form of gnawing interior discomfort. Ooh. Wow. This is a really good book, right? Their bodies are constantly bombarded by visceral warning signs. And in an attempt to control their processes, they often become expert at ignoring their gut feelings and in numbing awareness of what is played out inside. They learn to hide from their selves. Here's an example. On the 4th of July of the year 2002, I think. 2001 or 2002. I had about $17,000 worth of cash and marijuana in my bedroom, in my 2-bedroom apartment. To steal it, if you went through the front door, you'd have to get through the 2 locks on the security door, the 2 locks on the front wooden door, the 3 locks on the hallway door, and the 3 locks on my bedroom door. On the 4th of July, before we went to walk down to the fireworks at Ocean Beach, we left around 8:30. The fireworks started at 9:10. It took us 10 minutes to get there. I brought my red-nosed pit bull, Jaws, and right before the fireworks, he was starting to freak out. And I started to get the most intense gut feeling probably of my life, or one of the top 2, if it wasn't the most intense. I felt that something was so wrong. I knew that something was so wrong. I wanted to start walking home right away. Things changed. As soon as that happened in my gut, I felt pure evil. After the fireworks, we walked straight back to the apartment complex. It was me and a few buddies and my dog. Before we left to walk to the fireworks, Garrett said, my friend and roommate at the time, who was actually murdered years later up on Murder Mountain in Northern California. He was working on a weed farm before it was legalized, and the guy he was working for, who was a meth head, owed him 50 grand, and when Garrett tried to get paid, he shot him in the back. There's actually a docu-series about it. And this was my roommate and good buddy. He said, hey, Finch, do you want to put all your money in drugs? You want to hide it in my room? I said, no. We get back from the fireworks, and the evil feeling got worse. We get into my home, and in my window in the bedroom, I had really thick security bars. These people, these tweakers, meth heads, apparently came and used serious power tools, and they did it at the exact time all the fireworks were going off and everyone was drunk and everything was loud and dark. So I ignored. If I would have gone right home, if I could have jogged home in probably 5 minutes, that probably would have not happened. I'm guessing. Seemed like they had just barely left because it must have taken them a while to get that security gate. Nowadays, my gut feelings, I'm very in tune with them. When this book came out, The Body Keeps the Score, the mind-based trauma experts, so, psychologists, therapists, many of them laughed at the idea, and it's funny that some still do. So I wonder what they'd say about the spiritual aspect of trauma and healing if they laugh at the body and brain aspect. Here's a quote from Dr. Bessel A. van der Kolk. "We have learned that trauma," this is the author of The Body Keeps the Score, "we have learned that trauma is not just an event that took place sometime in the past. It is also the imprint left by that experience on mind, brain, and body." Here's the mind, brain, body, spirit-informed view of trauma and its healing. Dr. Gabor Mate says that trauma is an inner injury, a lasting rupture or split within the self due to difficult or hurtful events. Trauma is not what happens to you, but what happens inside you as a result of what happens to you. That's from his new book, The Myth of Normal, which is on my list. Christina Lopes calls trauma an inner injury at the mind, body, and spirit level. The mainstream says trauma happens in the mind, rational, intuitive, so your ego. Less popular is the idea that trauma is also stored in the body. So I'm of the opinion that the main reason so many people have trauma and aren't healing fully is that, like the gentleman's quote earlier, it's probably the most untreated, undiagnosed, avoided, repressed, cause of human suffering there is. And so there's that. And then when you put on top of that the people that do actually try to get their trauma treated, that they do, they're aware of it and they go to treatment, then there's usually just the mental treatment. So I'm of the opinion that it's because people aren't doing mind, body, spirit healing. And it's the same thing with addiction too. When you leave out 1/3 of the healing of your human being organism, then you're not going to have full healing typically. I haven't seen it happen. And this comes from Dr. Mate too. This is the 7 impacts of trauma. A separation of self. A fragmentation, you might have heard. There's fragmentation, separation from self. You're separated from, and why does that happen? When something traumatic happens, it's a self-separation it's like a survival mechanism. But that's not it. You also have a disconnection from others, an altered worldview. This altered worldview is not altered in a more optimized worldview. It's not a more informed, realistic, better, more empowering, positive worldview. It's the antithesis to all of those. It's a more distorted worldview where typically the person views it as unsafe, more unsafe than it actually is, scarier than it actually is, more dangerous than it actually is. Life is harder than it actually is. People are worse than they actually are. And then number 4 is lifelong pain. What the WTF? Lifelong pain? That's if you don't heal it. So as long as there's trauma, which there should be, if you don't do the holistic healing, if you just do talk therapy, maybe that can actually work, but maybe it takes a really, really long time, but I don't think it works. I think that trauma stays there, that separation of self that disconnection from others, all 7 of these, altered worldview, lifelong pain, I think they're present in the human person to some degree, as long as the trauma is still there. And it's an imprint on mind, brain, body, spirit. That's nuts. That's just really, that's really crazy and interesting to think about. Number 5 impact of trauma, cognitive development. It really, and again, it doesn't optimize or neutrality to your cognitive development. It is detrimental. It causes often significant negative consequences to cognitive development, you know. So when we're little, in childhood trauma, this is a really important distinction to make between adult trauma, which also sucks. But childhood trauma, our brain waves are not into the beta brain waves. We haven't developed the rational mind, the logical, rational, full prefrontal cortex activation, critical thinking, being able to discern the difference between truth and falsehood, fantasy and reality. When they're really young, they're in theta brain waves. That's the subconscious programming brain waves. That's like everything's make-believe. You know, Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy and the Easter Bunny, and they all think it's real, and they're in theta brainwaves. It's a beautiful brainwave to live in. When you get traumatized when you're a little kid in theta brainwaves, boy, do you store that in the mind, body, brain, and spirit. Yeah. So childhood trauma, and then what Gabor Mate says in his book, In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, Close Encounters with Addiction, is these childhood traumas, and then when you're around 5, 6, 7, more like 6, age 6 probably the most common, but right around that age group, then you start to get into theta alpha and alpha brain waves, which is the next ones higher above theta. And so then they're more able to kind of know what's true and what's not, and they're kind of waking up a little bit. They're becoming these little kind of mini adults once they start to get to alpha and then into beta. So my daughter is now in probably full beta, and she's a different person. I miss the alpha wave child and the theta wave child. Yeah, and then he says that the research shows that these childhood traumas change the brain so much and the nervous system so much that a lot of the time these people, for the rest of their lives, have nervous system dysregulation, usually upregulation, but also can also be down. And just a hypervigilance kind of fear nervous system of where danger, scanning for danger, at least unconsciously, lifelong pain, all this stuff. It's really, really unfortunate how much trauma. This is like a trauma planet. They should call it planet trauma, not planet Earth. Number 6, impact of trauma is personal shame. And then number 7, so no, let's hold on that. Personal shame. We're making good time still. Personal shame is a painful feeling that results from wrong or foolish behavior. So the wronger, the more wrong and the more foolish your behavior is, and the more conscientious and conscious you are, and more mindful and benevolent you are, the worse that shame's going to feel. Yeah, I don't miss those days. Oh, man. Yeah, alcohol. A lot of drugs I could use and not do anything that would make me feel later shame, you know? Alcohol was, I should call that liquid shame. Liquid shame. There was a good chance if I was drinking, I was going to feel shame afterwards. Not that I drank, but what I did after I drank. Right. I love triads. Here's a trauma healing triad that I learned from Christina Lopes. Step 1, speak it. This is the mind portion of the healing. And this is the sequence too. And this is actually how I healed my trauma before. And I did this accidentally. I did a self-healing of trauma that was totally accidental. Here are some methods for speaking it. Counseling. coaching, psychotherapy, journaling, NLP, which we covered on week 2, talking about your trauma with someone you trust. In the spiritual community or New Age people, they call it witnessing, the speak it, witnessing. So even if, whether it's a therapist, a loved one, your journal, as long as someone or something is witnessing. I put this in here, telling your pets about your traumas. I'm like thinking, man, if I still had some traumas, I would tell Papaya about them right away. Visualization, guided visualization, hypnosis, neurofeedback, and more. And that's the speak it. And so how I did the speak it was years of journaling, years and years and years and years and years of coaching. Well, the equal amount probably. No, I started journaling first. Yeah, so lots of years of journaling. And then I was blogging actually in 2014. I started blogging. So I wasn't really writing about my traumas, but in some of the articles I was writing about my addiction and going through the withdrawal. So that was kind of the start of it. And then what really helped eventually was in 2019, or was that 2020? Whenever we started the podcast, probably 2020. I think it was the summer of 2019, actually. Yeah, we started the podcast, and ever since then, we just talked and talked and talked. Chris and I did a lot of episodes together, and I interviewed a lot of people. And what I noticed was happening was the more I talked about my past and worked, sorted it out with Chris and vice versa, as we were providing episodes for people to learn from, we didn't know it at the time. Well, I didn't know it at the time. I don't think Chris had too much of any trauma when he was growing up, from what he has told me, but that was me speaking it. And that was also me having, someone witnessing it. And then what I noticed happening after doing the podcast for a while was I noticed step 2, move it. So all this was kind of, like I said, not planned for trauma healing. But then after podcasting for a while, maybe a couple of years, step 2, move it. This is the body portion. Things like shamanic dancing, breathing and dancing, drumming, breathing, dancing, Qigong, Tai Chi, yoga, grounding, primal scream therapy, shake it technique where you kind of just gently bounce up and down off your heels, just up and down off your heels, and you just shake your whole body like this, shake it. And I learned this from my Qigong food healing teacher. Shake. That's a great way to get rid of tension. Yeah, by the way, that's a great way to loosen up in the morning. Nature hiking, 9 breath method, breath empowerment, holotropic breath work, other types of breathing exercises. Now, when I was podcasting, so speaking it and also journaling, I wasn't doing psychotherapy or counseling or anything like that, but I was journaling a lot. I was still writing articles for a while. I haven't written an article in a bit. And I was doing lots of videos and podcasts, and so speaking it, and then people are witnessing it. And then all of a sudden, I was going on barefoot walks and doing breathing exercises. So these were not with the purpose of healing trauma. This is with the purpose of self-care, of health and wellness. And I noticed myself throughout the days. This happened for probably a few months, and I thought it was a new thing, like a new habit of my physiology. What was happening was these unconscious shakes. My body was and I was unconsciously, so this was not intentional. I would notice myself all of a sudden going, oh, like all this. I just felt all this like weight leaving me. It's like, whoa, and I just felt like getting freer, and I felt like really, really crazy. What's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. During this phase, I was having all sorts of nuts, lucid, trippy, quasi-spiritual, high-definition dreams. And other stuff was happening too, but it was like I could feel it. I didn't know it at the time, but it was the trauma leaving my body. It was step 2, move it, body happening. How cool is that? That shows you that the body wants to get rid of it, but we have to at least do the things. We don't have to know what we're doing, but we have to do it. So, and then step 3 is energize it. And by the way, if some of these things are new, which I assume some are, such as holotropic breath work, soul retrievals coming up, and they look interesting, I encourage you to do more research on them, because all these things on this slide are phenomenal. Step 3, this is where the spirit comes in. This is energize it. So we speak it, move it, and what speaking it and having the witness does is that brings it up. It brings it from the deep subconscious where it's all down there. It brings it up from the body, the brain, the mind, the spirit, and then it's like, okay, so if you don't move it, it just gets stuck there, or maybe it even fizzles back down after you're done speaking it. Who knows? Someone probably knows. I don't know. Then you got to move it. But then if you just move it and don't energize it, it doesn't get all the way out. Here's where you can employ professionals to do things like acupuncture. This is working with the energy and meridian systems. Energy healing, which is also working with the energy system. Or shamanic clearing. And with shamanic clearing, there's several different types, or at least a few, maybe several. The best one is soul retrieval, and you can actually do this all by yourself. I did 2 different really awesome. So this is the one thing that I did on purpose. I did energize it. What's so crazy is that I did this not long after my body was done, because eventually that kind of unconscious shaking and like a lot of times all these deep breaths were coming out. It was almost like when you have a trauma, fear-based nervous system, and you're kind of like bracing yourself and kind of locked up and frozen or fight or flight all the time. So then all of a sudden, when you start to speak it and then move it, and it's coming out like I'm mentioning, then it's like whoa, and I started to feel lighter. I started to feel happier. I started to feel way smarter, not smarter. I started to feel way more integrated, less fragmented, much more as like an integrated self, where my emotional brain, lizard brain and rational brain are all kind of working in harmony, it seemed. And let me go to the chat. There's a few, I'm going to have to look at my Audible library to find one of them, which I definitely want to tell you about this guy. And then another name, which I'll type in a second. Her name's Rebecca Campbell. And I forget the Audible I have from her too. Let me find my Audible app. Okay, one of them is called The Shaman's Heart Meditation Training Program by Byron Metcalf. I'll put that in the chat. This is on Audible. Man, I loved this. This is not a book. This is actually an experience. It's totally cool. Now let me find the Rebecca Campbell. Okay. The other one's called Your Ancient Past Lives by Rebecca Campbell. Yeah. Was I done talking about the energizing? Okay, so when I did the soul retrieval and the shamanic clearing with those 2 people that I just posted in the chat, they're both amazing. I almost guarantee all of you will totally love both of those people and like everything they've done. But after those experiences, they helped so much. It's crazy. Really fun stuff to get into for addiction recovery.